In your job there every day, and I would think with a lot of people there, climate was a big thing, right?
So, actually, it wasn't because there was a huge push towards the space station near the last half, and that was more about microgravity science.
Hmm.
There was various science going on there, and this was kind of a touchy point for me when I was at NASA. There was a large program called the Earth Observation System, and it was divided into multiple charters like EOS A, B, and C. And the ultimate idea of the EOS program at the time was to put up an elaborate array of satellites around the Earth for remote sensing
Hmm.
of various things: atmospheric, oceanic, land based, vegetation, precipitation, all these quantities, parameters that you can measure about the Earth, getting that massive amount of data down, massively processing it and storing it, and then massively processing climate models at the
Hmm.
same time. And there was a lot of funding that went into that program, but because of the space station and the desire to, I guess, have more or less the public relations standpoint of people in space,
Yeah.
the funding got stripped away from that program and into the space station. So, although there was a heavy bend towards environmental science, and although you could really start to see every day, I was exposed to amazing information that the public just generally was somewhat getting exposed to, like the ozone hole
Hmm.
or carbon dioxide levels rising, which we've been aware of. It's been predicted since the 50s that we would see the rise in temperature and CO2 that we've seen today.
Hmm.
So yeah, I was exposed to that, and yeah, there was some enthusiasm about it, but at the same time, there were these other needs,
Yeah.
and they were to keep the space program or the space shuttle program alive, and to do that, there was this general consensus that having humans on board space shuttles, having humans on board a space station, was most important.
Yeah.
Kind of like today, I think sometimes we're just way too focused on Mars.
Yeah.
Um, and even return to the moon as a
Hmm.
jump for Mars, when really we got to get back to the roots of NASA and NOAA and other agencies, primarily focused on solving a problem that, frankly, I think is much more complex and involved than a World War II effort or a moonshot effort
Hmm.
to basically reverse what's going on, that's causing climate change, if not technologically change the way we operate, maybe not just
Yeah.
as in an economical standpoint, but also maybe as a species.
So it must
Um,
drive you. It must drive you pretty crazy when you see these people get up there, the anti-climate change people, or even Trump saying that this is a hoax, and well,
yeah.
look, we had winter, we had winter, and it was cold, so there must not be a climate change effect.
Well,
So
when the overwhelming number of of consensus is that climate change is anthropogenic, when you see the numbers of people when you watch a media program, or at least a while back, they were really getting too much coverage to the deniers. It was unproportional to the consensus of science.
hmm.
At the same time, it almost seems that climate denial is a mechanism to incite pressures against progressive thinking.
Yeah.
It's just another one of those topics that you can use to, I'll just say, troll
Yeah.
people who are trying to think about the overall benefit to everyone, a non-protectionist type view to our society, as opposed to those who are, I don't know, worried about the great replacement or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always looked at it as like, when I see the people who are the climate deniers, they get on there, and then you see a lot of what I would call alt right or right people, that Trump supporters, they get all crazy and they say, "See, the hippies are trying to take over again," and it doesn't make any sense to me because these are the same people who complain about how hot it is, and then think, "Oh, it's always been like this," and I think, I don't think it's always been like this.
No, I mean, yeah, if you look at my Facebook post from yesterday, we got a plant that just showed up after 160 million years of not being around because the carbon dioxide levels are back up to
Really, I
levels
didn't
we've
see
never
that.
seen before. Yeah, over in the UK, it's a little plant that they've only been able to work with indoors and revive, but apparently blooming outside now because the
Wow.
CO2 levels are high enough. They're comparable to some of the volcanic activity and other things that were going on just during that time period. And so, a lot of people go, well, that just shows you the Earth's been like that before. Yes, sort of like that before. It
Millions
took
of
a
years ago.
long time. Well, and we're talking about millions of years ago, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of years to get there,
Yeah.
not since 1950.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. A lot of things just really took off after World War II. Processed food, injecting of chemicals into our environment, massive industrial scale like we've never seen before. Yeah, I know the cotton gin threatened us at one time, but this is crazy. And now we're in the next run of things. What we're doing with technology is pretty much going to save us from the technology that we've kind of leveraged, I think, a little too fast and too heavily without some concern for what the impact might be. I see a lot of people don't seem to grasp in their minds the impact that billions of people can have
Yeah.
very easily on something. And sometimes it takes, like the fires burning in Bolivia and Brazil, to go, well, that's just a handful of people causing a big problem. A bunch of farmers have gotten together and started some fires, somewhat under political pressure, somewhat under need too, understood that people are going to burn fires to make food and do things like that. But
Hmm.
I think there's, again, a lot of conservative political leaders around the world, like Boris and Bolsonaro and others, who are more focused on short term business gains
Yeah.
and business goals and not on long term business gains and business goals. I love Jimmy Carter, and not because he was um, not because he necessarily had it all together, but the guy did have a great idea when he put solar panels on the White House. I was like, yeah, you know what? That's pretty forward thinking.
Hmm.
If we could have changed the economy back in the 70s towards a greener economy, knowing that in the future we would have to change our ways. If we had not maybe given over to oil and big oil and other things like that in the way in which political lobbying injected into our political system, I think we could have been a lot further along right now. But it's been difficult. There was a need for growth, and fossil fuels was a fast way to get there.
Hmm.
We constrained nuclear energy a lot. I don't know how that would have turned out. That could have gone one way or another.
Yeah.
But it would have helped supplant that temporarily to get us to leveraging more renewable energy sources. But that's kind of what we need now as part of our toolkit to dealing with environmental issues.
So
Um,
you mentioned the Amazonian fires, and I saw a I saw a meme that went around for a little bit about the Notre Dame church that caught on fire, and that all these news
yeah,
cycles were going through it, and people were donating billions of dollars to fix the roof, and and when you saw the damage, it looked like it was at the top of the
yeah,
roof, and then they say, and we are just about to lose 20% of our oxygen, and it's barely gotten any coverage.
yeah, because that's an easy program to tackle. Look, it's like going to Mars. Space tourism is a profitable something to shoot for that a billionaire can take on and go, hey, this is cool. What doesn't seem to be cool is how do we tackle not just the technological aspect of an environmental disaster, but all the socioeconomic and political things that are necessary to tackle it. It's an overwhelming issue, and it's not something that one billionaire can get themselves around or one organizational religious group can look at and go, oh, we need to build our church back, as big as it is and as historic as it is. We know we can do those things. A moonshot, obviously, was an incredible thing that we did. But let's face it, we didn't have to get to the moon. We
Right.
wanted to get to the moon.
Right.
World War II, we needed to defeat Nazi Germany. But if we hadn't, we might have had another chance later to do something about it. Although, granted, you can look at history and say, nah, it looks like that was pretty much it. We probably would have been overrun if they had actually developed those crazy jet fighters and
Yeah.
some of those nuclear bombs. We
Yeah.
might be all speaking German, who knows what now. But now the environmental crisis is highly complex. There's no couple of evil empires somewhere that we've got to defeat.
Yeah.
There's no brute force method to go and fix this thing. And so when you look at something like the fires, and how do you go stop them? I mean, this isn't the fire of one building.
Yeah.
This is a fire spread out all over almost an entire continent
Yeah.
now that's going on. And it's more than just a, hey, let's go dump water on it type situation.
Yeah.
It's also we didn't stop the arsonist. We have a
Yeah.
political arsonist, and we have little arsonists that the political arsonist is incentivizing by going, hey, we need to make beef our primary export, or, hey, we want to build this super highway and a bridge over things. And then you've got, I've had some arguments with conservative friends that they say, oh, well, you've got, you decimated your forest and stuff like that. What right have you got to tell anybody else that they should preserve their forest? There's some truth to that, but we also preserved quite a bit of our stuff as well too. That argument that we can't do things, it isn't just sanctions or political pressure that we need to do with Brazil and Bolivia. We need to help them out. There's economic pressures that are causing this. There's needs that these people have as they're growing, that we have to figure out very quickly. That's one of the biggest scale items we need to tackle, is how to open up access to the world for people, education, information, and opportunities that don't require destroying the environment.
Join us on Polis, where we work to find common ground through discourse. We will talk about all things, political or otherwise. This is an open forum for discussion about all aspects of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.